so, yes. And so it's like go live. There we go. And then it says,
Hey everyone! Welcome to the stream. It's nice to meet you all. I'm Rem Alternus. I'm the crowdfunding manager for Mark for Space Command Great Solar War, and Whitney.
Yeah.
Nice to see you here, Whitney. Whitney is my she's the one managing the campaign. She's built the whole thing. And Mark, please, even though you need no introduction.
Yeah, well, I'm Mark Scott Zickery, writer, director, producer, creator of Space Command, along with my wonderful Elaine. And we are launching the campaign for the Great Solar War, which is the next wonderful episode of Space Command. And it's going to blow everyone away. It's on such an amazing scale, and it's got such an incredible cast. So we're rocking and rolling.
Awesome. We came on today at noon with you because we want to push the button together. We want to do it live with you. We want to push
Cool.
the I'm ready to launch button. So I've got a screen share of it. So I'm going to click this button
Great.
first, and then it gives us all the warnings.
Cool.
Launch project. Here we go. 3,
Okay.
2, 1.
Yay.
Loading. Loading. Loading.
Yes.
Loading. We're live!
Yay! Cheers! Excellent. That's great. That's great. That's great. So yeah. So this is a dream come true. This is a project. We've finished shooting hour 6 of the 12-hour season. We're in post-production on that, moving along, having visual effects meetings, and all of that stuff. And that episode is in hand, and it's looking great. And Great Solar War is hours 7 and 8 of the 12-hour season, and we've already started shooting it. And Elaine and I are writing the production draft. Here's the production draft right here of the script, and there it is. And one thing I do is I keep the photos of my cast in front of me when I'm writing, so you can see Ethan McDowell and Doug Jones and Sue Ann Peen, who's going to be playing the Secretary General of the United Planets, and Bob Picardo, and I've written a role for Bill Mumy, and there's an actress I met who played Megan in the horror film Megan.
Ooh.
And so I've been talking with her about playing a role in Space Command, and many other wonderful people. So it's really thrilling. Plus, of course, all of our regular Space Command cast that we've come to know and love over the years.
We've just gotten our first backer at $50. Thank you so much.
Yay!
Yay,
$50.
You
Yay! and one thing I should say about Space Command, as opposed to so many of the other science fiction TV shows and movies, first of all, there's no one above Elaine and myself in the food chain, so there's nobody to screw it up. There's nobody, no network executive or studio executive who wants to put his girlfriend in it, or some actor who can't act, or or a funny kid or a dog or whatever. I mean, if we put a dog in, it'll be a dog we like. And but also we can shoot for much lower than the studios, because they have such a huge overhead that Space Command would easily be 10 times the cost that it is, just because we'd be at a studio, and so a lot of money would be eaten up unnecessarily by all sorts of things. And so we're sort of lean and mean, and it's the way we like it. So it's very fun. We're able to cast the people that we like. So, for instance, I was introduced to an actor who had been in The Big Lebowski. Ooh. And he's one of the 3 kidnappers at that scene where they confront Lebowski and his friends. He's the one who goes, "I fuck you, Lebowski. I fuck you up the ass." That's that guy. So I thought, well, he's certainly talented. So he's going to be playing an industrialist in Space Command, and so forth. And one of our investors, his daughter's an actress, and a very good one. And so she's going to be playing that actor's granddaughter. And so again, I can follow these intuitions and these feelings, and it creates a wonderful team, and we just have a wonderful time shooting.
It's really inspiring, Mark, to have the career that you've had and be able to make something that is yours, that's owned by the creators, that's for creators, that's that doesn't get stripped by the studios. And it's so exciting to your whole mission to be part of is super cool. So thank you for bringing us in.
Well, thanks, Rom. I appreciate it. I mean, again, I'm a fan just like all of the other science fiction fans, and we've all had the experience of we'll have a favorite show and it'll get canceled, and that's that. And
Yeah.
or you know, fortunately with the Expanse, they flew an airplane over Jeff Bezos, and they got him to pick up the show for an extra few seasons, which was great. But again, it's like it's so on the whim of these people, and I want to take that out of the equation. For instance, many of my friends are novelists. One of my great mentors was Ray Bradbury, and Ray was able to have a career that he was able to write what he wanted because he was writing in books. He had an authorial voice, and his fans could follow what he wanted to write about, whether it was the Martian Chronicles or Fahrenheit 451 or Something Wicked This Way Comes. They were able to see what he was interested in and what he was creating. In television, the creators are often frustrated and slighted because they'll write pilots that don't get picked up. They don't get to have a free hand. And these are brilliant, brilliant creators like Ron Moore, who did Battlestar Galactica and Star Trek The Next Generation, and more recently For All Mankind. But he just came out of a deal with one of the studios where he was developing stuff for, I think, 4 years, and none of it's gotten greenlit. So that's 4 years of his life and his creative output that has been blunted and by these guys. And so I really want to create a world where series creators can form a relationship with their audience and make their dreams come true.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So for anyone that that hasn't followed the Space Command saga up to this point, what can they expect from the very first Kickstarter and very first episode through now?
You mean from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
From when we were all children in short pants. The I've fortunately, over 95% of the scripts I've written have gotten made, hundreds of hours of network TV because I was on staff. I rose up to producer and executive producer and so forth. And so we would always be looking not just as an individual episode, but as at the arc of the season, at the arc of 5 years of a show. We would be shaping the entire story. And certainly Joe Straczynski did that on Babylon 5, which I was very involved with and wrote for. But so it started with the first 2 hours of Space Command Redemption, which is now complete and available for people to rent and buy and so forth on all these different platforms, and they can get Blu-rays and DVDs. And it introduced our characters. It introduced a young captain who on his first mission and his first command, but we saw him in his relationships. We saw his mother, we saw his father, we saw how he had grown up, and we saw what he stood for. Because the message of Space Command is very much a moral one of, are you making the world a better place, or are you making the world a worse place? And if you're on the wrong side, it's incumbent upon you to change sides, basically. And this is not a political message because, again, our investors and our supporters are all across the political spectrum. It's not about that. It's about compassion and empathy. It's about you want your children to grow up to have possibility. You want them to be taken care of. You want them to be safe. This is a human feeling across the board. And so the more we have empathy and the more we have compassion for everyone, the more we can create a world worth living in, a future worth living in. That's what Roddenberry felt. That's what Rod Serling felt, certainly. And it's what I feel. So Space Command introduced us to a number of characters. Our initial cast, of course, was Ethan McDowell, who's now in Walking Dead, and he just shot an episode of the Righteous Gemstones for HBO, and he came off Doom Patrol. But we had a worldwide talent search for him where everyone in the world could audition for the roles of Captain Kimmer and Lieutenant Bradbury, and we got 7,000 inquiries, 1,200 video auditions, and we cast Ethan McDowell in our lead, and Brian McClure as Bradbury, and a number of actors, and but we also had Bill Mumy from Babylon 5 and Lost in Space, and Bob Picardo from Star Trek Voyager and Stargate, and Doug Jones, the great Doug Jones, who was on Star Trek Discovery and The Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth. And the wonderful Mira Furlan. Mira Furlan, I worked with on Babylon 5, and she was spectacular. And so we created a major role for her. Sadly, we lost her during the pandemic, the West Nile virus, but we actually, in the episode we're now in post-production on, Forgiveness, we actually have her character come to a very heroic place as her farewell as a character. And because we wanted it not just to end abruptly, we wanted to really pay homage to Mira, and we also have the wonderful Nichelle Nichols in Forgiveness. And so what we're doing is we cover it's basically 200 years in the lives of 4 families as we go out into the solar system, out into the larger galaxy, and how we find connection and how we find belonging and how we find um, a way to create a future worth living in by reaching across boundaries and barriers. And I love, I grew up in Los Angeles. Star Trek debuted when I was 10, and I was really, Star Trek had a major influence on me. And one of the things I loved about Star Trek was the variety of people you saw in it. Asians, black people, everyone. And, people don't often mention the Jewish contingent on Star Trek, but I think Shatner and Nimoy are both Jewish, if memory serves, and Canadian, there's Canadian contingent there, Shatner's Canadian. But the point was, in LA, I would ride the bus to school or whatever, and you would have the entire world. You would have people of every race and ethnicity and background. You'd hear a smorgasbord of languages, Spanish and any number of things, Yiddish when I was growing up, all sorts of stuff, and also different sexual orientations. And it wasn't, I live in West Hollywood, which is a gay majority town, and I welcome that. I like variety. I live in the world, and the world includes everybody.
That's
And
awesome.
so that's the message in Space Command. But also, it's a big science fiction show with spaceships and space battles and androids and aliens and all spacesuits and all the fun stuff. So I have every bit as much fun making it as anyone would watching it.
That's so great. And thank you to our viewers, to our backers. We are at 5 backers, $402. So thank you
Wow!
guys
Yay!
so much
Well,
for
we're
the
on our
support.
way. This is so great. This is so. But see, I love financing via my fans. I think it's wonderful. And because when I was a kid, when I was 10 and Star Trek, was threatened to not have a third season, I was out there at night in front of NBC with the crowd holding my little sign, save Star Trek, a little kid. And I felt doing that. I felt that I was part of that world. It was a wonderful thing to be an NBC caved. We sent them a million letters, a million. These are handwritten letters in an envelope with a stamp, and they gave us a third season of Star Trek, which was just enough episodes to be able to rotate in syndication. And had that not happened, if it had just been 2 seasons, it might not have become what it has become. So I think I learned the early lesson that the fans and the audience could make a difference. And now with crowdfunding and selling investment shares and all of those things, the relationship is between me and the audience, not between me and the network, not between me and the studio. I don't have to dance to their tune. Now, if they step up and want to be our partners for distribution, for marketing, fine. I welcome that, because that's not blunting my vision, it's spreading it. But I don't have to wait, and I don't need to. I mean, I write, Elaine and I, we'll write it, we'll cast it, we'll shoot it, boom. And our fans are welcome to come to the studio. They're welcome to see us shooting. They're welcome to have roles in the show, and and that's super fun. This is an episode that has a lot of Space Command personnel in it. It's got a lot of colonists in it. We get to see characters over the course of decades. We have a prequel of Space Command that starts 30 years from now, and it introduces us to our characters. It was done as a radio play and as a graphic novel, and we've combined it into an animated storyboard, and that's called United Planet. And that has Mira Furlan, Bill Mumy, all of our cast, Ethan McDowell, Doug Jones, Bob Picardo, Mira Furlan was in it as well. And that prequel ends 60 years from now, and then the redemption starts 60 years from now, and we follow that adventure. And then the next episode's 3 years later, and the episode that we're starting, Great Solar War, is 20 years after that. So Captain Jack Kemmer is now Fleet Commander Kemmer, and his son, who's 23 now, Ed Kemmer, is a weapons officer on another ship. And so a lot of the characters have grown up. A lot of the characters, we see what's happened to them. Many of them now are married. They have kids. Chilton, Nathaniel Freeman, who plays Chilton, sort of the Scotty of our show. He has a grown daughter now in Great Solar War, and that'll be played by the wonderful Angelique Scott, who many Space Command fans know because she was working on the production side of the equation with us, and now she's going to play a role. We actually shot an introduction to her character that the fans can watch on Mr. Sci-Fi. So
That's so
there's
exciting.
a lot of possibility. Yeah, it's super fun. And we've written the entire script of Great Solar War, and we've written the script after that in its entirety, Empire, which will star Armin Shimmerman and Christina Moses of A Million Little Things, and there are many, many, many actors from your favorite TV shows and movies waiting in the wings for their moment in Space Command, and more than a moment. And then after that, we do Mousetrap, and that's the final 2-hour episode of season 1. So that'll be the whole ball game.
That's so exciting. So my next question was going to be, what can we expect from Great Solar War? So we got a little taste of that. Now, what's different about this Kickstarter, in your opinion, Mark? And then I want to ask Whitney some questions too.
Sure. Well, what's different is Great Solar War. We've planted a lot of seeds in the first 4 hours of the show. And so, for instance, in Redemption, Robert Picardo plays a mining engineer working on Ceres, and he oversees a group of synthetics, androids, one of whom is Doug Jones. And there's a big mining accident. A lot of synthetics are destroyed, and they're basically, throwing them on the fire and burning them up, and they'll just, have the warranty on them and get replacements. But Bob looks at Doug, who's kind of half alive, and he says, I think I can fix this one. And he intercedes because of his compassion, and he repairs Doug, and Doug is the one synthetic who does not have an inhibitor chip. His inhibitor chip has been destroyed, which gives him free will. And so things go from there. But Bob Picardo, as Yusuf Sikander, who's a Muslim character, interestingly enough, it's just his religion. It's not the totality of who he is. He's not the token Muslim. It's just, I have a friend named Yusuf Sikander who's a Muslim, so I based it on that guy. And so he's raising his son, and his wife died in an accident. And so, but we see his relationship with his son, who's about 8 years old, and then something happens, and the son is left essentially alone to be raised by his aunt. And during the pandemic, we did a bonus episode called Ripple Effect, and we saw that boy, now a teenager, same actor. He's now a teenager, and he's being raised by Barbara Bain of Space 1999, playing his aunt on Europa. So we established that. And now in Great Solar War, he's an adult, and he's leading the miners of the outer colonies to basically see where that leads, if they can get a fair share of the pie. And it's escalating into war, not the same as in The Expanse, because in this case, there's a group of alien refugees who are running from a very, very ugly threat that is a major part of our storyline. And so he teams with these aliens who are refugees to basically take on Space Command and the United Planets. And Jack is in the middle of it, trying to stop a war that's going to kill a whole bunch of people. So so Jack's in the middle of that, and he has to go to Doug Jones's character for help. And in Redemption, we met the creator of the synthetics, Greg Mazzy, played by Bill Mumy, and he was this industrialist, sort of like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. And now it's 20 years later. Now in Redemption, he was a dying man, and he was going to go into the deep freeze until they find a cure. So in the interim, his granddaughter is now running Mazzy Patillo, this huge corporation, and she's brilliant, and she's the inventor of this prototype faster than light drive, and she's 14 years old. so that's the role that I'm envisioning for the actress who played Macon in that horror film.
Cool.
And she's terrific. And again, she's sort of like running this enormous corporation. She's brilliant. She's the inventor of the faster than light drive, and because that's the only way they can get to Dornevan to get the EMA ship, this 5-mile-long alien spaceship, back to help turn the tide in the war. Because our guys don't have faster than light drives, but she's very, very lonely because she's at the top of the food chain. She really doesn't have friends, but she's a genius. Mm-hmm. But in order to stop the war, we have to defrost her grandfather, who she's really never met, because he went into the deep freeze when she was little. And so the two of them meet for the first time and bond. So this is a lot about families and connecting and healing old wounds and the repercussions of past actions. So it's really cool.
It's neat hearing you talk about it, because it's like, geeking out about, like, let me tell you the entire plot of Babylon 5, because I'm so excited. Yes. And I'm a fan myself. So hearing your enthusiasm and passion for it is really fun. Yeah.
Well, the fun part is that because, I came up with a generation of writers who changed science fiction and changed television in a major, major way. So, for instance, when I started on Smurfs and He-Man and all those shows, I met J. Michael Straczynski. I then developed Captain Power. I got him hired as the story editor. Those producers were the producers and the VFX team that he ultimately did Babylon 5 with. Babylon 5, Joe had been watching Hill Street Blues, and he really liked the way they arced their stories. And so he thought, well, let's do this in science fiction. And he was really the first one to have a story that arced over the course of a season. Because prior to that, because of syndication, where the shows would be shown out of order, they wanted no show to be, they didn't want any advancement of plot over the course of any season. Mm-hmm. So for instance, the first episode of Star Trek is interchangeable with the last episode of Star Trek. It's Kirk, Spock, McCoy on the Enterprise. And, so for instance, on the original Star Trek, in City on the Edge of Forever, Kirk falls in love with Edith Keeler, then has to throw her under a truck so the future will be perfect, and he's devastated. But the next week he's got another girl, because they can't allow the stories to grow. And so all of us wanted to change that. We wanted to have, so when I developed Captain Power, it did have an arc. I laid out the first 5 seasons. Sadly, it only ran 1 season, but I knew where it was going, and I knew who these people were, and I worked out their backstories. And so Space Command very much is in that tradition. That's and awesome. When I wrote for Star Trek: The Next Generation, and then when I wrote for Deep Space Nine and so forth, I was very aware of wanting to tell stories that would be meaningful. When I came up with Far Beyond the Stars, I wanted to do things I'd never seen before on television that were profoundly emotionally meaningful to me, and that I knew would be meaningful to millions of people around the world. And,
That's great.
And it is. Yeah.
Well, we are up to $1,072, 8 backers.
Yay.
We're 2%. So thank you all
great.
So much.
Thank you all. Yes, tell your friends, tell your relatives. I mean, the thing is, the fun part about Space Command is you can really see where the money goes. Because I'm not driving a Rolls Royce. I'm not I'm not being fanned with palm fronds by girls peeling me grapes. I think for one thing, Elaine would object to that. But beyond that, it's a waste of money. And so so what I am doing is everything I've learned from all of these years writing science fiction. So when I wrote the Twilight Zone Companion, Rod Serling had shot Twilight Zone on the MGM lot, and he had access to everything that they had ever made for any movie or TV show. So you see things from Forbidden Planet and Andy Hardy movies and Meet Me in St. Louis cropping up on Twilight Zone. And when I was a producer on Sliders, I asked if we had the same ability. And they didn't know because no one had ever asked, but they found out and they said yes. So we were using things from 12 Monkeys and Time Cop and Best Little Whorehouse in Texas and Jurassic Park, which gave us added production punch. Yes. And so on Space Command, even though we've designed and built many things from scratch, and Ian McCaig is our character designer. He designed Darth Maul and Queen Amidala and the Mark Ruffalo Hulk and the Avengers and Harry Potter stuff. Yay! Yes, exactly. Ian was Ian's been a big designer on Star Wars. Now he's redesigning. He's designing Captain Kemmer's Fleet Commander uniform. He's redesigning some of our aliens. He's doing but so we have a lot of these incredibly talented people. But also, when a big science fiction movie or a big science fiction TV show ends, a lot of those items, the sets, the props, the costumes, come available through auction or through eBay. And so I have all my feelers out. So I'll buy spaceship consoles and costumes and props and so forth, so that we have 3 sound stages full of all of these things, from Falling Skies and Outland and Aliens and Prometheus and and on and on and on and on. And it gives us a huge amount of production value. And so because I have the whole season of Space Command in my head, plus the 5 series that we're also developing to do after Space Command, I know what I need to buy. I need what so when I'll see something, it's like, oh, I can buy that, and that'll augment what we're building, what we're designing. And so it's wonderful because I can see the long road.
That's awesome. So something that I'd like to cover, and Whitney, I know you are in the weeds with this Kickstarter. We're doing something a little different with the rewards and the add-ons this time. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So when we were reviewing previous campaigns, we saw that a lot of you really liked all the stuffs, which is great. But we wanted to take it one step farther and make it the most customizable that it has been yet. So you'll notice that from the reward tiers that there are a lot less, but don't fret. That doesn't mean the stuff is not there. Where we put it actually is in the add-ons section so that your rewards are way more customizable. So that you can kind of pick and choose from, instead of having to put in a pledge for one big bundle that might have some stuff you're not as interested in. You're now able to go in from, say you pledge at a $50 base. And you get all the stuff and you're like, yay. And then you can go into the add-on section and be like, ooh, I also want the sci-fi swag bag and the pin. I'm not super interested in the poster, but I love that t-shirt. And so now it's like you have all these options at your hand, because I think it's really cool that, you know, seeing what works is great, but also having that ability to make it so personal to what your interests are and how you like to express your fanship, you know? So that's way more customizable than it's ever been before. So your stuff is still there. It's just in the add-ons. It's okay.
Now, one thing that is brand new to this campaign that we talked about is having each campaign have something that's exclusive for our backers of that campaign.
Yes.
So we went with a pin, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us
There
a
are
little bit
two-
about it?
Yes, 2 pins that are going to be exclusive to this Kickstarter, so you will not be able to get them through other normal platforms. There's going to be a Great Solar War specific pin, so it'll feature Great Solar War design for this specific episode, as well as the launch, of the beginning of different pins that you can collect for the various spaceships that are featured in all of Space Command, actually. And I think we are kicking off this campaign. You can collect the beloved Paladin pin.
Ooh. Tell us
Yeah.
about what is this Paladin, Mark? Tell us everything.
What
Well,
is this Paladin?
Paladin is our hero ship. It's the ship that Captain Jack Cameron commands, and we see it as it evolves over the course of the 200 years of the show. So, for instance, in Redemption and Forgiveness, we saw the Paladin that we've all come to know and love. And Dave Dorman, who's a Star Wars artist, designed the Paladin, and then it was detailed and put into CG and rendered by Tobias Richter in Germany. And so in this episode, they have to add a prototype faster than light drive to the Paladin. So they lower the Paladin into a structure that turns it into a flying wing, because that has the faster than light drive. So it's going to be this incredible flying wing design that will be really cool, really cool. And and Dave Dorman designed that way back when we were just starting. I thought, oh, that's going to be so neat. And it's super fun. And again, you know, we have Greg Mazdy's granddaughter Rowan, who's the inventor of the fast and light drive, and Jack goes to see it being tested in prototype, and she's in a little sort of one-seater plane that's been outfitted with this prototype drive. And what we're going to do with that is, I actually bought a real jet canopy, and we're going to put that over her, and we're going to reflect. We'll have like big TV screens reflecting warp drive for the jump to warp, and that's going to be reflected in the canopy real time as a practical. And we'll have her on. We'll have like stagehands moving her on a tilt, so we can actually have her in this craft, and with it reflecting over as she jumps to warp drive on the canopy, reflecting that. And again,
so
it's,
cool.
it's I don't know anyone who's ever done anything like that. Again, when you saw Top Gun Maverick, you saw the fun part of having it real-time reflections of the sky and the clouds, and as the G-forces hitting all of that. So we're going to be shooting it that way, and it's going to be incredibly cool. So
that's so awesome.
She'll be in a smaller flying wing, like sort of like a stealth fighter, and Paladin will be more like a stealth bomber. You know, so it's really cool.
Great. That's awesome. Anything else I'm missing, Whitney? That's brand new to this Kickstarter?
I mean, us. Let me think. I think the biggest part is the rewards and the add-ons, but I mean, the story is something that I'm particularly excited about. Well, I got to go watch all of Space Command, so I'm like, I want to see what happens next.
And then there's also stretch goals coming, right?
Yes. Yeah. So when we surpass our funding goal of 50K, at some point, we have not yet revealed that. So our stretch goals are going to have some unlockables, if you will. If we hit those stretch goals, we're going to be offering even more that you can collect. And so I think you all will be very excited to see what comes from that. But you don't get to know now. You have to get us to our goal first. So.
Which
That's
we're
great.
on
That's
our
great.
way. We're at
That's cool.
1384, 10 backers.
Yay.
Thank
That's
you
great.
guys.
That's great. Well, and one thing I want to say is, everyone who contributes, as a backer, we put your names in the credits at the end of the show. If you don't unless you're on the run from Interpol or something and don't want your name publicized. But again, I mean, I went on the original Star Trek set when I was a kid. I got to sit in the captain's chair. I got to stand on the transporter and see the little light bulb that was, screwed in above it, and it was magical. And if someone had said to me, Mark, your name can be on the final credits of Star Trek, it's like, holy cow, really? And when we got to cast Nichelle Nichols in Space Command for Forgiveness, to go to her house and bring the scrapbook of when she'd signed a photo to me when I was a kid, when she'd written letters to me when I was a kid, to bring my scrapbook from when I was 10 years old and flip through it, looking at all the Uhura stuff, and having her sit there with me 50 years later and just being blown away and signing that album was just spectacular. And so, and some, by the way, I noticed in the crawl that someone's asked what next gen episode. I came up with the episode First Contact, where it's not the movie, it's the episode where a planet develops warp drive and the Enterprise is sent to make first contact. And so that was the one I came up with. And then someone also mentioned the great show Space Patrol that was from 1950 to 1955, which was a wonderful TV show. I highly recommend it. And I got to many, many, many years later meet the star of that show, Ed Kemmer, who I named Captain Kemmer after. And he played Buzz Corey on Space Patrol. And I also got to meet the producer and head writer of the show as well. And a friend of mine, Jean Noel Bassior, wrote the book on the making of Space Patrol, and I helped her kind of find a publisher and all of that. And so that show's a big inspiration, even though I never saw it when it was on live because it was off the air by the time I was old enough to watch television. But I watched it in Kinescope, and it's a great show, really great spirit. And so there you have it.
That's awesome. Oh, so neat.
Cool.
Well, we've been on for I have this thing where I'm in Eastern time and it's the time is now 1, 2, 3, 4. I look at the clock all the time and it does that to me. What is we've talked about the series so far. We've talked about this new installment. We've talked about the Kickstarter. What else, Mark, do you want your viewers, your backers to know going into this Kickstarter?
Well, let me just go over a little bit of our cast, just because I think it's pretty cool. And again, my way of casting is I'll meet people and they impress me and I'll cast them, or I'll be at a convention and I'll meet an actor and we'll talk, so and I'll find, but I don't just plug them into a role that has no meaning. I have to write a role specifically for them. I wrote Dorn Evans specifically for Doug Jones. I wrote Yusuf Sikander specifically for Bob Picardo and Von Odara for Mira Furlan and so forth. So it isn't just, having one of your favorite actors appear in something and be wasted, and because these are incredible actors, these are brilliant actors. And so Ethan McDowell, when we cast him as Jack Kemmer, when he won the talent search, he was an unknown. Now, of course, he's on Doom Patrol and Walking Dead and Righteous Gemstones, and he's a guy. He's like a guy that the audience knows, and so I feel very validated because he's a wonderful guy and a wonderful actor, and he knew going in that this would be covering a number of years in the show, in the story arc. So, for instance, in the Great Solar War, he's going to have a beard, as you can see from the poster, because he's older now, and and he can play an older guy, and also here in Los Angeles, every waiter and waitress is either an actor or a writer or both. So often you can say to any waiter who comes up to your table, how's the script going, or how are the auditions going? And so I've also cast a number of waiters.
That's awesome.
So for instance, the actor playing Jack's son, he was a waiter at one of the restaurants we went to, and he looked like a young Ethan McDowell. So I cast him, and we used him in Ripple Effect, which was the episode we did during the pandemic, where we would direct long distance, and the actors would shoot their own scenes at their own homes, and then we would weave it all together. And And with Bill Mumy, I've known Bill Mumy since I was 7. I was homesick one day as a kid. I was a latchkey kid, and Lost in Space was on the air. This is before Star Trek. I was like 7, and I pulled out the phone book. They used to have these big phone directories with everyone's name who was in the city, and so I just started calling the names that were the same as the actors on Lost in Space, and most of them weren't the right people. But there was only one Mumy in the phone book. It was Bill's father, and when I dialed the number, I was in my pajamas, by the way, and I called, and his mom answered. Bill Mumy's mom answered, and he was on Will Robinson on Lost in Space at that time. And I said, "Is Billy there?" And she said, "Hold on." And Billy came to the phone. I was on my little rotary telephone, and he said hello, and I was so nervous. All I could do was blurt out, "Will you be my friend?" and hang up. But then when my mom came home from work, I told her about this, and we called Billy Mumy's family back. And as soon as I was over my cold, we went and met Bill, and we traded comics, and we've known every each other since then.
The cutest story.
Yeah, me and my little jammies at 7, and which tells you that I was the same weirdo back then as I am now. I mean, that's it's pretty hilarious. But then when I wrote the Twilight Zone Companion, I interviewed Bill about the 3 brilliant episodes he was in on Twilight Zone, including, of course, It's a Good Life, where he wishes people to the cornfield, a great classic. And then we worked together on Babylon 5. So there's photos of me on the set with Bill and the other cast members on Babylon 5. So to work with him again is wonderful, and to have him play, and something that's fairly rare in science fiction television and films. You don't usually get to see the characters sort of in Matrix. And I don't mean the Matrix like Keanu Reeves. I mean, you don't get to see their parents and their grandparents and their kids and their friends and the people they're in relationships with, and and so forth. And in Space Command you do. So Bill Mumy, he has, in this episode he has a granddaughter. Ethan McDowell, in this episode he has a daughter. Sue Ann Peen, who's a new arrival to Space Command, she was recently on a show that was very highly acclaimed on Netflix that I always forget the name of. It's something like What We Think or What We Feel. I don't know. It's some weird name. It was about a group of autistic people living together in a house. And it's a drama series, and it got great response. And Sue Ann is an Asian American actress, and she is autistic. And of course, being autistic, she's on the spectrum. Being autistic, she's a science fiction fan. Yay! And because science fiction is a big tent, and people who are very, very smart and may have some social awkwardness, science fiction is a home. And so I said, "Hey, you want to be in Space Command?" I brought her to the studio. She geeked out over our sets and all that stuff, the giant robot. And I said, "Sure, yes, she wants to be in Space Command. Great." So she's going to be the Secretary General of the United Planets, and she's going to be in romance with Jack Kemmer. So it's going to be super cool. And I mentioned Torsten, the actor I met who was in Big Lebowski, Torsten Voges, and he's a German actor. He lives in both LA and Germany, and he's got this incredible face. He's older now, and he's got long blonde gray hair and an amazing looking guy. And he's going to play the CEO and owner and guy behind Smile Corp. Which is Smile Corp is a multi-planetary corporation that makes everything from robots to footballs to you name it, and they sort of exploit the resources of the outer planets and the people, the workers of the outer planets. But it's Smile Corp, and their ad line is "We make happy." And and they're sort of ominous.
Smile Corp in and of itself is ominous.
Yeah, you said Smile Corp. I'm like, that's the bad guy.
Yeah. But then his granddaughter is played by Leah Demont. Ron Demont is one of our Space Command investors. He's a very dear friend. He's from England, and his daughter is both from England and also is growing up in Texas. They go between the two. And so Leah is 11 years old, and she'll be playing his granddaughter. And because she's gotten into acting, and she's wonderful, and she's cute as a button. And so we're flying her in from Houston or from Dallas, I guess. And she'll be playing his granddaughter. So then, and Doug Jones is in it. Doug is, we have to go to the planet that he's settled with all the other synthetics, and and ask for that alien spaceship back to win the war. And, so Doug gets to have some wonderful scenes with Jack Kemmer and talking about humanity and how problematical humanity is. And Ian, it's interesting because Doug, as Dor Nevin, wears this incredibly gorgeous helmet that was based on a design by Ian McCaig. And Ian and I were talking yesterday, in fact, and Ian said, well, I think by now he would have a different helmet. He'd have a different look. And so let's do a redesign on that so that it's the evolution of that character. I said, sure, you bet. So in the next few weeks, I'll be seeing Ian's design and we'll build it. And then Bob Picardo, who we all know as the holographic doctor from Star Trek Voyager. I met Bob many years ago, and when I did the Star Trek episode with George Takei, which you can actually watch on Mr. Sci-Fi, I just posted it the week before last. When Bob saw that episode, he was blown away by it, and he said, I want to work with you. And so I wrote the character of Yusuf Sikander for Bob. And basically what we're doing, and just to explain this a little bit, we're creating an ensemble, and I tell my actors this, we're creating an ensemble of actors who will be seen in different projects. So they're seen in Space Command, but then Doug Jones and Armin Shimmerman and Bob Picardo, they'll be in other projects. So for instance, my wife Elaine is shooting a feature that she's writing and directing and we're producing, and Doug Jones is in it, and Armin Shimmerman is in it, and he plays, they play characters in this small town. It's not science fiction at all. And then the other shows we're going to be doing, Sweet Haven and Fugitive Space and so forth, these actors will appear again in those shows. So it's an ensemble with all these brilliant actors playing different roles in different things, so that we get to see their enormous range. And and then Jacob Weddle, who, also Bob Picardo. I should mention Bob was coming back he's coming back in Great Solar War, and he will be playing a character named Deuce. And I won't say anything more about that, but if you're curious about that character, Ripple Effect, you can watch that on Mr. Sci-Fi, and that might tell you some interesting things about that character. And then Yusuf Sikander's son, Odin Sikander, who we met as a little boy in the Redemption, is now going to be an adult, and he'll be leading the miners of the outer planets, and he's very angry and he's very principled. He's very idealistic, but he is leading basically a contingent of several million miners from the outer planets and several million aliens from another system, a new race that we've created that we meet first in Forgiveness, a race called the Pasara, and they're 8 feet tall, and they are very cool, very cool. So so we're hoping that Jacob Weddle, who played the 8-year-old boy, and now he's at college age and he's like 19 or 20, that he'll be playing our adult version of that character.
That's so exciting.
We're reaching out to him, and yeah, it's very, very fun. And
hey,
then
Mark,
Brian McClure, who played, yeah.
We're at 1564, 13 backers.
Great. Well, tell your family, tell your friends, if you have a rich aunt who's about to kick the bucket and give you an inheritance, speed her along.
Oh, no.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. But seriously, this is something we can all be part of. You guys are welcome to come to the studio. You guys are welcome to be part of Space Command. We have, you can play roles in Space Command. You can have it's just super fun. I mean, you can see from this, just me describing the cast, that some people are backers, some people are children of our backers, some people are major actors who we have loved for decades. Some are actors that we've built their careers, and now they're on these other great shows and TV, but they're not leaving Space Command, even if they are on Walking Dead, even if they are on all these other shows. Brian McClure, he won the talent contest for Cadet Bradbury along with Ethan, and now he's in this show. He's 20 years older. He's got a grown daughter who's a crusading journalist, and that's also played by the daughter of one of our backers, Todd Chamberlain. It's his wonderful daughter Elizabeth Chamberlain, who is an actress, and we had her in Ripple Effect playing Brian's grown daughter, and Brian's now older. And the funny thing about Brian, I got to tell you, is Brian McClure, who plays Bradbury, is a baby face. He looks much younger than he is. Okay, so Brian, he looks like he might be like 18 or something, and we've seen him in Redemption, we've seen him in Forgiveness. Brian's sort of on around 40, so finally he gets to play his real age, and so this is going to be very, very fun, and. But he's terrific, and Elizabeth is great, and Nathaniel Freeman, who plays Chilton, he's the fun part in Nathaniel. I'll tell you about Nathaniel. He in Space Command, he has dark hair and a dark beard and mustache. But I run this roundtable for actors and writers and directors and producers, and it meets every Thursday, and it's thousands of people around the world just to create a compassionate Hollywood. And Nathaniel is a member of our roundtable. So one day he shows up, and his hair is white. And I say, what? His hair and beard are white. And I said, what's going on? He said, well, I'm 60, and this is my actual hair color. And I said, well, in Great Solar War, since it's 20 years later, that's going to be your hair color in that episode. And so, he's going to play, an older version of Chilton. Now, I should mention, by the way, that these characters that we've introduced, Bradbury and Chilton and Borges, who I'm going to be talking about, they're like, under Jack as the crew of the Paladin in the episodes we've seen so far. In this story, they all are captains of their own ships. So Captain Bradbury, Captain Chilton, Captain Borges. And, so that's going to be super fun. And Angelique Scott, of course, is playing his daughter. She's wonderful and beautiful and very talented. And I should mention, by the way, that Brian McClure just was in the Showtime film that starred Jessica Lange as an older actress who's getting dementia. He's a documentary filmmaker making a documentary about her. So, I mean, if you just twirl the dial, you'll see all these Space Command actors. And then Victor Manso, who plays Borges, he's another actor. I met him. He was working at the ArcLight Cinema, the restaurant there. He was the maitre d', and he was an actor, and he's from Venezuela. He's a wonderful actor. And so I cast him as Borges in Space Command, and he's terrific in it. And so it was very, very funny, though. I've got to tell you, most of the Space Command characters, particularly those actively in Space Command in the show, are named after classic science fiction writers. So we've got Sturgeon and Le Guin and Simak and
Bradbury.
Lieutenant Bradbury and so forth. Yes. So originally I had written a character, and I decided to cast Victor, but I named the character before I met Victor. I cast him. The character was based on a writer named Murray Leinster. And I thought to myself, well, Victor does not look like a guy named Murray Leinster. But I had to think of, okay, so what fantasy or science fiction writer is there who's a Latino? And so I remember the great Jorge Luis Borges, who is a terrific fantasy writer, brilliant writer if you've never read him. And so I named him Lieutenant Borges, Jorge Borges, after that great writer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then in Ripple Effect, I'd been telling Victor that I wanted to have a scene because Victor's fluent in Spanish, and I wanted to have characters speaking foreign languages as well as not Vulcan, but I mean like French and Spanish and Italian. So in Space Command, it started with Mira Furlan, who of course was from former Yugoslavia. So I cast her, and she spoke Serbo-Croatian, and I cast an actress as her daughter. So when they were talking to each other in Redemption, they're speaking Serbo-Croatian, and when they talk to other people, they're talking in English. And so with Victor, in Ripple Effect, we had a scene between him and his father and his fiancée where they're all speaking Spanish, and he's trying to convince his father, who he's estranged from, to come to the wedding on Mars. And so Victor and his wife are both captains in Space Command. They both have their own ships, and so we're going to see that actress again too. And so it's just great fun, and even our DP, who is Sicilian, Massimiliano Treves. We actually had him in Forgiveness in a little spaceship with his right-hand guy, Andrea, speaking Italian. And they find a pod floating in space that's part of the plot. And so again, I invite the entire world into Space Command, and it's very, very fun. And one of our actresses who's in Forgiveness, Tatiana Sokolov, is Russian, and she was just one of our backers on Kickstarter. She bought a role in Space Command. This is before the Ukraine war made everything more complicated, and she flew in from Moscow, and we shot her role, and we made her a first officer working with Captain Matt Cameron, who's the great grandson of Jack Cameron, and functions in a later part of the plot. So so it's really fun. So I couldn't be happier with our cast, with our friends. And then finally, there's an actor named Nick Roberts, who's an old friend. I've cast him many times, and he'll be in Space Command. He's an older actor. And then one of our investors is going to is an older actor as well, very talented. He's from the Midwest. He's an acting teacher, and he's going to be one of the miners, one of the beaten down miners with Nick, and they're going to be basically almost like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, kind of commenting on what's going on and talking about, gee, I don't want to be in a war. I guess we've committed to this, so we got to do it. It's like, it's fun. So you have people coming from every which way, and so it's very, very neat. And So yeah, so I haven't been following the questions. I don't know if there's other questions, but I'm happy to answer anything anyone wants to know. I mean, but one thing I will say is that at the beginning of Space Command, if I'd asked a network to approve the cast I wanted, they would have said no. They would have said, "Who's Robert Picardo?" They would have said, "Who's Mira Furlan?" They wouldn't have cared,
Yeah.
and they would have wanted to. I remember one friend of mine. He was asked to showrun a show on the CW, and they sent him like the pilot. And in the pilot, there was like a scene between a father and son. And because they were CW actors, they were both the same age, playing father and son. Because like one of them was in his 20s playing 40, and one of them was in his 20s playing a teenager. And he looked at this and he said, "It's ridiculous. I can't run this show. It's ridiculous. These are, and I don't have to deal with those problems because I'm not having to jump to crazy rules, crazy regulations, So,
Yeah.
So
Gosh.
I've got to say too, Mark, that this is everything you've built is such a great testament to who I am learning you are just as a human, just at the
Thanks.
core, you are community, you are compassion. Like, it's so cool to see that, because I know from like having been part of like stage productions in the past, like
Yeah.
you might love the show, you might love the material, and that will keep you there for the duration of the show. It's a whole different thing to have a TV show that's spanning decades even, but having people that really want to come back, that want to be part of this
Yes.
ensemble. That's not about who's in the spotlight as much as it is like, I just love these people, I love this story,
Yeah.
and like the community is what keeps you coming back. Like the story can
Yes.
be great, but if the people stink,
Right,
like,
exactly.
is it worth it? But you have created
Yes.
such a community with your backers, with your cast, with just everybody that's like they keep coming back because of you.
You've
It's a
made
family.
you've made
Well, now you
Hollywood
guys,
accessible.
Well,
Yeah.
you guys now are part of the family, Whitney and Rem. I mean, and Inez, the wonderful Inez de los Santos, who's our line producer and right-hand
She's
person,
the best.
and Dave Edison, our brilliant editor. But all of this stems from Elaine. People, Elaine doesn't like to be in the spotlight like I do. I'm a big ham. Elaine's behind the scenes. But I met Elaine when I was 20. I was a student at UCLA. I had sold one short story. I was an art major, and the next year we were married. I was married at 21, and Elaine must have been crazy. It's just like, what was she thinking, marrying this art student? But it worked out, and she was compassionate and wonderful, and had integrity, and had this incredible warmth and this humor. And God knows what I would be like if not for her. It's like we just celebrated our 47th anniversary last week, and she's the best part of every day. I say that often. And it's true. It's true. I mean, I get to be with her, writing, directing, producing, and I never tire of her. She's wonderful, and she's very intent on creating a family, and a safe atmosphere for people, and just where people want to come and collaborate. And we view everyone on the team as our partners. We're not egotists in that way. I'm very driven. I have a vision. I know what my abilities are, my talents. But I don't need to be putting people in their place. I don't need to be an asshole. And there's plenty of other people who can fill those roles. And one of my favorite phrases. There was a great movie written by a writer named Larry Gelbart, and at one point it was a comedy. It was called Movie, and he had a trial at one point, and he had one of the lawyers refer to one of the characters as a man of the highest scum. and there's a lot of people like that in Hollywood, but you don't have to work with them, and you don't have to be one of them. And so we make it fun, and when I step on my spaceship sets at our studio, I have the same thrill as when I was a kid going on Star Trek sets, and that was the last episode they ever shot. I was so lucky because a week later there would have been no Star Trek there. It would have been empty. And it was an episode called Turnabout Intruder. And there's a scene in sick bay between Kirk and Janice Lester and McCoy and Nurse Chapel. And if you had stood a few feet back from where that shot is, I was standing by that camera as a little kid. Okay, but I remember one of the great things I remember from that day was one of the stagehands said, "Last show of the season." And under her breath, Nurse Chapel, the great Majel Roddenberry, she said, and I was the only one who heard it because she said it under her breath. She said, "Last show ever." And the irony was she was wrong, thank God. but she then married Gene Roddenberry, and when I did the Star Trek episode with George Takei, Star Trek New Voyages, World Enough in Time, which is on Mr. Sci-Fi, I actually went to her house and recorded her as the computer voice of the Enterprise, and that was the last time I think she ever portrayed anything in Star Trek, because she was dying of cancer at that point. And but to meet her, she actually showed me Gene Roddenberry's ashes. They had been shot up into space and brought back on the space shuttle, and they were in a frame on the wall. So that's pretty amazing.
That's
pretty
so
amazing.
neat. Oh wow.
Yeah. But
Well-
but also, Star Trek and science fiction in general is a big tent. And the thing I love about science fiction is the fact that people welcome you in, that you can meet your heroes at science fiction conventions. When I was a kid, I noticed that Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and Star Trek all were written by the same guys who I was reading novels of, Theodore Sturgeon and Ray Bradbury and Harlan Ellison and on and on and on, Rod Serling. And as soon as I was a teenager, I got to go to science fiction conventions and meet these people who became friends and mentors. And they understood that writing is I was going to say a holy chore. I think Harlan called it that. It was an enormous opportunity and a great honor and a great responsibility that you have millions of people looking at your work. You don't want to waste their time. You can inspire people. You can move people. You can validate their lives. You can validate their truth. I mean, I'm so proud of the fact that in Far Beyond the Stars, it takes place in the 1950s with a group of science fiction writers, all played by our Star Trek actors. And at one point, a black teenager Sirach Lofton, is breaking into a car, and the New York cops murder him. And Jake's, Benny's a science fiction writer. He says, "You murdered that boy. He wasn't armed. You murdered him." And that was 1997, 98. I mean, to have a major studio say on a major show watched by millions of people, the cops murder black people. I mean, this is 20 years before Black Lives Matter, but you can be sure that every black person who saw that episode said,
Yeah.
That's validating what we know is true, but the larger audience doesn't know is true. And so it was like, because we see it in that episode. We're on the right side of that equation, and that's what science fiction can do. So that's some of it. So
my Skype call is going off. It's meeting time. So we do need to wrap within the next couple minutes. Mark, I'm hinting at something here, whether or not you want to go pull that thread.
Sure.
But I know with the campaign having 29 more days, is there anywhere that you're going to be in the next 30 days that people can see you while the Kickstarter's live?
Yes. Thank you for asking. Yes. We're going to have a panel and a signing at San Diego Comic-Con in a few weeks.
I'll be
and
there.
I will be there. Yay! It'll be great to meet you in person, to see you in 3D, get the full effect. And and so I'll be there for the entire run of Comic-Con, and then I'm going to the Star Trek convention in Las Vegas. And so they can see me there, or if they hang out at Astro Burger at Santa Monica Boulevard and Gardner, I'm there a lot too. So, and also here on Mr. Sci-Fi. So so that's what's going on, and and you can tell I love this. This is people often bandy the phrase labor of love, and often it's not. It's God knows what it is, but this really is a labor of love. I love Elaine. I love all of you guys. I love this world that I get to work in. I get to wake up every single day and it's Christmas. I mean, to be able to work with these incredibly talented people, to be able to my art form is television. I've written novels and I have the ability to do that, but I would never want to be a novelist full time. I'd be a pale, sad creature. I want to work in, TV allows me to use all of my talents, all of my skills, and to reach millions of people and to be engaged in a conversation. And I love that. And I'm so grateful to all of you. And, this would not exist. Space Command would not be happening if not for the fans. And, and you're part of the family. And the more you want to be part of Space Command, if you want to build a spacesuit or, play a robot, or whatever, let me know. And yeah, really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Whitney, for all of your work on the project. We'll be live 30 more days. We are at 1589, 14 backers. And can't
Great.
wait to see it continue to grow. So thank you so much,
Yes.
guys.
Well, thank you, Whitney and Rem, and everybody who's part of the team, and thank you, my fans and my friends, and I look forward to meeting you at conventions or anywhere I go. One time I came, I'll finish with this. Elaine and I were in England, and we were going to a meeting of the BBC, and I came out of the tube, which is their subway system, and I hit the sidewalk. And down the street, a guy yelled out to me, "Mr. Sci-Fi!" He said, "I love Space Command. This is in England."
Aw.
Out of the blue, and I love that. I love that. So thank you all. And we will continue this conversation again very, very soon. Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye.